Wicked for Good is the follow-up to last year's Wicked. It takes place some years after Elphaba is named public enemy number 1 and escapes Oz. She's doing what she can to take a stand with the talking animals of Oz who are facing discrimination and aims to expose the wizard for the fraud he is. So this movie extends the first one's focus on ethics. It's about the integrity behind our good deeds. The movie explores the reality of those who do things for others for the sake of doing good, as opposed to some whose good deeds are just performative and have a hidden agenda behind them. Though fortune should favor those who are morally driven to do good, it often favors those whose deeds are the loudest, while those who are not glory-seeking tend to get overlooked. This one also touches on whether or not being ethically driven is even worth it in a world where people tend to loathe hearing others boast their morals. This movie takes that premise one step further by being about media manipulation. The film shows a system that rewards those who play the game, putting on a show of honor and virtue even if they've stepped over others to get there. Meanwhile, less fortunate people trying to do the same face backlash whenever they speak up because for some reason or another, they are not favorable to the public. And the media clings to the narrative the public already believes, twisting intentions and punishing anyone who doesn't put on a show. So Elphaba gets framed as the villain despite trying to do good, and that influences how she has to navigate the other characters, namely Glinda and her sister Nessa. There are things that happened off screen in between movies that have affected how Elphaba and Nessa see each other, and with Glinda now being a public figure, effectively being the false hero figure to the Ozians, capitalizing on Elphaba's villainization, Elphaba has thoughts and feelings about how things have transpired. So starting with the good, the relationship between Elphaba and Glinda was the movie. Their relationship wasn't perfect before, but now it's been deeply fractured. There are times where they firmly stand opposite to one another, but it's the in-betweens when they're together and talking about things that the substance materializes. Naturally, with the direction the story goes as teased by the beginning of Wicked 1, you could probably guess that there's a lot of weight to some of their interactions. As much as you'd probably love for a kids movie ending that makes everybody happy, there is real damage in these relationships, so while the ending does have surprises, you should not expect the squad to end up like the gang from your favorite sitcom. The emotional parts are where the movie kind of rests the pacing, so the emotions of the characters are truly felt. If nothing else, the emotional parts are what most people will latch onto. They are what really keep the movie sailing. There were plenty of young ladies walking out of that theater crying. Otherwise, many of the best qualities in the first movie have been diluted in this one because it's not so much a self-contained story. It's really just the rest of part 1 that was missing from that movie. So all of the dynamics from the first movie have vastly changed as the result of plot and character development. Pretty much all of the positive relationships have soured. On one hand, that kind of needs to happen as that's where the story is going, but on the other hand, we don't really get to see the gradual development of those relationships. So let's rapid fire through each character one at a time, starting with Elphaba. Because of the time jump and the way she's changed, she definitely feels a bit hardened. The world has essentially forced her to be that way, so she's more stoic, but she's still got the same heart underneath that shell. Glinda is less of the firecracker she was before, but she's still delightful. She still has some humor up her sleeve. She just doesn't fire off hilarious moments left and right anymore. But she is the other half of our heartfelt character combo and delivers on that front. Fiora is no longer the beloved himbo and is now just the noble knight with a moral dilemma on his conscience. He's pretty one note, as is Madame Morrible, who's just a flattened villain. The wizard got his day in the sun. I actually thoroughly enjoyed a scene he shared with Elphaba and Glinda. Nessa is certainly going to be everyone's least favorite character in this movie. I'll dig into that more later in this video. Bach has basically been reduced to serving one purpose, so whatever path you might have thought the first movie had him going down is probably different from the one he goes down. And as the headlines have already teased, Coleman Domingo voices the Cowardly Lion, and it totally worked for the little bit of dialogue that he had. Funny, seeing those headlines, I had the thought, oh cool, I wonder who's playing the rest of Team Dorothy. I will simply say that I'm really glad that I did not try looking that up, and I would strongly urge you to not do so either. Again, rather than seeing the evolution in the dynamics, they seem to have happened off screen in between movies, so some characters are different enough that the change does not feel super organic. Really, this movie overall is just a big step down from the first one, so there's much less camaraderie, less fun and games, less laughs, and less exploring new avenues of the world building, because it's already been established in the last movie, and this one doesn't really aim to individualize itself. Basically, the kids grew up and are more serious and less entertaining, so all of the in-betweens of the major plot points are less memorable as a result. It's mostly relying on the gravity of the major plot points to do the heavy lifting, like all the twists and pivotal moments, and some of them feel pretty contrived. If you're like me and you haven't seen the Broadway musical and your only knowing of this world was from The Wizard of Oz, the world building might feel a bit confused here. Specifically in how much of The Wizard of Oz's corny 1930s writing it wants to embrace versus what it wants to update and modernize. Like coming from The Wizard of Oz to Wicked Part 1 should feel like a big leap through time, going from very cheesy, loosely written world building to trying to mold that into more sensible soft world building that feels like a carefully thought out fantasy world. So they try and stay true to some of The Wizard of Oz, and sometimes the result is what feels like Marvel Studios writing, where they just don't really care so much about the means to the end and the origin stories. The best example of that is Nessa's character development. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm gonna guess that you have not seen The Wizard of Oz. It's a tough sell trying to create that character development seamlessly. That is, of course, if they're trying not to retcon The Wizard of Oz, so that's a little bit jarring. But then they retcon some things in that movie anyway, so it's a little bit of a chin scratcher, but there is something to be said about the fact that this is a sequel. Pretty much all sequels hinge on the viewer understanding the world that's been established, so this one relying more on the big lore moments as opposed to just interesting story is not unheard of. I'll say that the ending surprised me a little bit, maybe not in a way that I was totally blown away, but I kind of just thought, oh, interesting. So the first movie had received 10 Oscar nominations and 2 wins. I think this one will get a lot of the same nominations, but the competition is different this time. The 2 wins were for costume and production design. It'll probably get nominated again for both of those, but let's acknowledge that both Wicked movies were done in one production. It was all done in one go. Academy voters might not want to vote Wicked again because they already gave it the win for the production that this movie is just an extension of. Plus, Frankenstein is going to give this one a run for its money, especially in production design. As for the other categories, I'll just focus on the big ones. This will probably get nominated for Best Picture. It's not winning. It did not get nominated for Best Director last year, so it's definitely not happening this year. And Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande will probably get nominated again. Cynthia is losing to Jessie Buckley for Hamnet. My review for that movie will be up later this weekend. Ariana Grande is the big question because honestly, she was my favorite supporting actress of last year, but then, category fraud happened. It's tough to say because while she's still really good here, again, she's just not really the scene-stealing firecracker that she was in the last movie. Plus, having just seen Sentimental Value last week, which had 2 incredible supporting actresses in it, it's really tough to say, but honestly, that makes the award season more exciting, just not really knowing how it's gonna play out. So many of my discrepancies with this movie might sound petty when you consider the fact that the source material is a Broadway musical. The type of loose, cheesy writing that this story relies on needs no explanation when brought to life through the magic of theater. It being adapted to film is a different story because if we're being honest, we all hold different entertainment mediums to different standards. Even with musical numbers, it's hard not to acknowledge the very cinematic aspects of this movie and hold it to the standard of what it is, which is a movie. And by those standards, it works, but it's just less of the wonderful experience that was the first movie, which I'm not surprised by because I've heard it said by many fans of the musical that the second half is not as good. So all things considered, I'd say this movie was fine. It has a lot of heart and some of the same charm as the first movie, but it lives in the first movie's shadow in almost every way. You diehard Wicked fans don't need my blessing. Y'all already bought tickets if you didn't already go to an early screening. If you generally liked the first movie, you might still enjoy much of what this one has to offer. For those of you who thought the first movie was only okay at best, honestly, you're probably not gonna be crazy about this one either. If you are interested, definitely go see it at the theater. It's still a fun theatrical event to take your friends and family out for. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really helps this channel grow. I will see you later this week with my review of Hamnet.